All right, good morning, everyone. It's 7 a.m., January 31st, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 We have a quorum. I hope everyone had an opportunity to see the super blue blood moon this morning. If not, better run outside and take a look.
I think
First,
it's pretty much gone.
First item on the agenda is the Fire Relief Association pension proposal. And I believe Luke Jackson's here to talk to us about that.
Morning, Mayor, council members. Speaking on behalf of the Fergus Falls Fire Department Relief Association, we're here again annually to present information regarding our pension account in regards to our vested liabilities, SBI account performance, funded status, and already presented the request to increase the per year service benefit level amount by $300 from the current $4,600 per year service up to $4,900 per year service. Annually, our board meets to discuss the pension amount. We look at things like SBI performance, our funded status, and the main thing is our funding ratio. And the number that we typically look at is fully funded means our state statutes requirements of our liabilities were fully funded by our investment accounts that we have. And that would be 100%. We like to have a cushion of about 15%. So we target our funded status to be at or about 115%. This past year, investment performance was pretty strong across the board, and it jumped up to 136% or 136.5. So that 17% cushion we have above and beyond that 115 affords us some room to request an increase. With careful consideration, after our board meeting, we looked at market factors, what may happen in the coming year with a market correction. But with how we're sitting, you may have noticed in your 401k accounts, you probably got 20% return this past year, which is pretty good across the board. Our annual return was 13.5%. So again, we're kind of in that fine, well-diversified portfolio that we have. So we can sustain those market corrections that are forthcoming. So we're not too concerned with, if there's a big downturn, we should be able to weather the storm pretty well with where we're at. We've got that big cushion. So back to the funded ratio. This increase from 46 to 4,900 would drop our funded status from the current 137 down to 122. So again, that still affords us quite a bit of cushion to that 115% that we'd like to be at. So after careful consideration, the board met and determined that that $300 could be appropriate based on our funded status and our current investment performance and the department members that we have on the board right now. So with that, I would like to refer to any questions you guys may have.
Any questions for Luke?
One question on it. Just out of interest, look, obviously, if the fund does fall below 100%, are you able to reduce the pension amount in the same way that you can ratchet it up?
Yes, sir. So it can go both ways. Typically, it hasn't gone backwards historically in the numbers we have, but that is an option. And one thing to note, when it falls below that 100%, there can be a required contribution from the city. Historically, the last time there was a contribution, it was in 2010 and 2011, which equated to about $63,000. I think it was 36 one year and 20 the following year. Looking over the past 50 years, it's been about 18. On averaging, there's a big section where zero requirements were made, or funds from the city were required. So it was about 50 years. It's about $1,800 per year the city's kicked in on average, 50-year history. But the goal is to remain self-sufficient. We've done pretty well with that in our investment accounts for the last 7 years. But to answer your question, yes, it can go backwards.
Any other questions? If not, would someone like to offer a recommendation?
Offer it.
Second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Would you like that on the consent agenda? Is that
Sure.
okay? Is that all right with everyone?
Consent would be fine.
Thank you, Luke. Next item on the agenda is the FEMA Assistance to Firefighter Grant, and Chief Ryan Muckhouse is here to talk to us about that.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just here today I put it in the council packet, try to put in there, is looking for an okay to submit for the Assistance to Firefighter Grant fiscal year 2017 through FEMA. The little bit of background there, the department's been pretty successful in the past on achieving some of these grants when we've applied for them. Maybe not the first time, but we go maybe apply 2-3 other times, and eventually we'll usually get it. The most recent one was the self-contained breathing apparatus, the SCBAs that the firefighters wear. That was fiscal year 2016. So it would have been a couple of years ago that it was offered. And that one was worth about $170,000 or so from FEMA. And then again, the cost share to our budget or to the city is 5% of that. So with the upgrade of the air packs, we also found a little bit of a shortcoming within the station, and that's our ability to fill the air packs and have the capacity within our fill station. So we thought, well, maybe this is a good opportunity since those SCBA and related equipment is still a high priority for FEMA. Thought maybe it's a good time to capture to see if we can get a new or upgraded fill station and compressor for the SCBA's, which again, looking at pricing, runs anywhere from $40,000 up to $65,000, $70,000, depending upon model, and some of the things that go with it. So with that, just looking to see if we can get approval to submit for the fiscal year 2017 Assistance to Firefighter grants for that said equipment, not to exceed $75,000 of the grant.
Questions for Chief Muckow?
I'd make that motion that it goes on the consent.
Motion?
I'll second that.
Tom, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Chief. Item number 3 is downtown design guidelines for the downtown reform master plan. Amy Baldwin.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Before you this morning is consideration of a proposal to develop downtown design guidelines. And as you recall, back in December, the City Council did approve a downtown and riverfront master plan, and design guidelines were anticipated as a jumpstart project within the plan itself. These guidelines would address areas including streetscape, wayfinding, building faces, parking, landscaping, and general private signage, as well as public signage if as appropriate within the district. The intent of the guidelines is to create a tool to guide future development and reinvestment activities in the downtown. So to get that consistent look and feel that's desired by the community within with investments that take place. It would, the guidelines would be drafted to support the vision and the concepts and recommendations within the master plan itself, and provide a guide for staff, businesses, and property owners and developers to use within the downtown area. It should be noted that these are anticipated to be guidelines and not mandated requirements for following if there were private property owners using private resources, but it is anticipated that if there was public resources or public involvement or it was a public project, that the guidelines would be followed. So just to make that known, it's not something that would be placed upon people unless there was the desire of them to use it or if public funds were involved. The Planning Commission reviewed this proposal at their last meeting on January 22nd and did recommend approval of the guidelines as presented. There was the format of the preparation of this work would be that the Planning Commission would lead the process, but there would be stakeholder and community engagement that would take place at a number of points throughout the preparation process of the guidelines. The budget for this work would be $20,000, and it's suggested that funding would come from the City Fund 264, which was initially funded by federal community development block grants in 1979 and 81. The primary use of this fund today is the revolving loan fund that's focused in the downtown area. That's the Business Development of Fergus Falls pool of funds that's administered by the HRA. But interest and investment earnings over time has allowed this fund to grow, and it has been used for planning-related efforts in the past, most recently a historic survey in 2015 and the West Lincoln land use study in 2010. So again, the earnings that have been put in place allow us to use it without really impacting the pool of funds that are available for the loans. So it's been a good use in that regard. Next steps would be to get going by the end of February if this proposal is approved, with completion in 2015. We do anticipate also coordination with Springboard for the Arts on various engagement tactics, so to think differently about how we connect with the community on this design process, on what does the community want to see as components of what would be in the guidelines. The guidelines will be helpful as we look at some of the next steps that City Engineer Yavaro will be talking about as far as the design of the public spaces on the east and west parking lot sites. And so that the design guidelines that would be developed through this process could influence the design of that space as well as we look to move forward on that potential project. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or I do have a couple of links to examples of design guidelines that have been drafted in other communities if you wish to see the type of product that we're proposing to be developed.
Anyone have any questions for Amy?
I think it'd be good to see the links.
Sure.
So I'm opening first the Eden Prairie example, and it shows their town center area. So it was a district as well, not community-wide. So the table of contents, I think, gives a good idea of the level. Would look at street systems, what types of designs when, Washington Avenue was contemplated in the master plan as a narrowing and changing the feel of that street. This would get into a higher level of detail. So as example of a public realm type of example, the lighting, the sidewalk treatments, the landscaping, again, signage, public spaces, park spaces, and then private development. So that's in the Chapter 3 area, looks at site development, how buildings would be placed. We've contemplated potential new buildings within the west parking lot and some infill opportunities on the east end of Lincoln. This would talk about placement on the street, that it would align, for example, on Lincoln, that the streets are brought up to the sidewalk as the feel is on the blocks on Lincoln right now. So coming back to that would be, fleshed out in more detail, but that would be the type of things they look at with building placement, signage. Those are on the private side, the scale, the massing of the buildings, how the buildings look, the finished materials, so it'd be complementary to our historic downtown. Those types of details would be put together and spelled out. You can kind of show, so it just shows the area. This is an example of a particular street, so it would get into the detail, not as example. It would actually take, for instance, Washington Avenue and show the cut of what the layout would be, whether bike lanes or how sidewalks would lay out, trees, street trees, things like that. We aren't anticipating landscape islands within the streets, certainly, in this. This is a suburban context, but gives example of how it would look for that as we move forward, and some other street examples. This is the pedestrian bike circulation, so it would get into some level of detail in looking at the, we have sharrows within the downtown right now, that it would get, thinking about how to support circulation of those types of modes. The plaza, we mentioned the idea in the east parking lot, and the west as well with the river balcony, street trees, gathering spaces. Not all of them are, would be exactly, but that's the intent of this one. This is the private development side. Talking about the building scales, massing, form, facade, so the finish of the buildings. In this example, they don't have a historic context. It's a new built type of suburban community, so we would anticipate references to the historic components within, if it's researching back what buildings might have looked like and trying to get back to that.
So as an example, we have a revolving loan fund you mentioned that's downtown for the facade, for
Correct.
example.
Yes.
So this is, if someone were applying for that, we would maybe have a little bit of leverage to help them with what their design would fit into what our plan is that
Right.
accurate?
Right, and we'd want to help them. The point, the idea is not to make it more expensive or more of a process, but that it's helpful and additive to their investment that they would be looking to make in the building. But again, if private resources, it's not contemplated, we wouldn't require, if a sign permit came in and someone is just paying for it out of their pocket, it's not anticipated that like, for instance, the sign guidelines would need to be followed for the issuance of a sign permit. That wouldn't be the goal of this. Is that helpful in the example, or?
I wonder, do they have anything that's more like Fergus than Eden Prairie?
Sure.
I mean, and obviously St. Paul's a little bit bigger than we are, so.
Well, it was a district, yeah, as well, but Chaska, oops, let me get back in here.
And I suppose while you're digging that up, or trying to connect it, what is the actual main focus area? Because obviously the downtown
Sure.
riverfront plan went all the way from the dairy to Shopco
Right,
and
this-
all the way up to kind of pretty much Lake Alice.
Right, the anticipated, here, it was in the proposal. So the anticipated boundaries, but again, these could be looked at where we want to implement them, would be Summit to the north, Junius to the south, though I think that we could have question if that should go down, to Vernon or the rail line. Oak Street to the west, so where US Bank is, and then east, is generally Freiburg. So it would loop around there. So this one for Chaska is just related to signage, so it's just a component, but they really wanted to dig into the signage on theirs. But this does talk about more of the historical context and, again, defining the area, talking about the historical context, and, we would have some reference to that. So it does have some areas that would be looking at. So orientation and placement of signage, how you think about signage, whether it's coming out from the building or flat against. Materials of what it can be made of. They got into a little more detail than what I would anticipate ours on the signage, because they really cared about it. How they're lit, and the installation. Projecting signs, wall signs, awning canopies. The wayfinding, I think this is a good example of, to understand what that is. So it'd be directing people to, potentially river access features, whether, a farmer's market area has been contemplated, so that where be multiple points within the district that would direct you to other key assets within the downtown area. So that would be an example of wayfinding and what that would look like. And then branding itself is on there.
Roger, next. Brent, go ahead.
The concern I have here is, why is it mandated for some and not mandated for others?
Well, certainly that is up for discussion, but what is suggested is if someone uses their private dollars out of their own pocket, that we wouldn't mandate them. Some communities do make them mandated within the code, and so even with private investment, we could mandate them. I'm not suggesting that, but that if there's public resources, whether it's loan funds or tax increment financing or, whatever the source of public dollars would be, that would be then our requirement to follow these guidelines if we are supporting the financing of a project. So whether it's signage, facade, our own investments, from streets to landscape, those sort of things.
Well, my biggest thing is we're putting, there's been complaints about how the city spends money on a lot of different items. And we're looking at putting $20,000 into it, and we could have, half the people come in and turn around and build a building wherever they want. And then we're tying the hands of the other people to do it. Now, I agree with this. I even talked with Andrew about this once before, about if we're going to go with the historic downtown, then we want to try to, keep the buildings that are being built down there to the historic history. So the problem I have is spending $20,000 that is going to tie the hands of some and not the hands of all. I mean, if this is going to go through in this small of a section, I would rather like to see it mandated for all of them that are being done downtown.
Rod, did you have a question?
Yeah, a couple clarifications. When I'm reading the intent of this from HKGI, as you've explained it, that it's to create tools to guide future development and reinvestment activities in downtown. This is from HKGI. So this plan that's being created at this point is to guide the future development and reinvestment activities. And the first thing I'd like to see, Ms. Baldwin, is the key stakeholders that are mentioned in this at numerous times but are not identified. I'd like to see us, council and everyone, I'd like to see us truly list those, because some of the feedback I've gotten from downtown and others is that they didn't feel somehow, even though there were invitations in the paper and on the radio and other places to our meetings, that they didn't feel a full awareness of the plan. And whether that be perception and or how much reality, the key thing also is that just the opinion or the sense of that they are truly being invited in, and the key stakeholders are the people that own businesses in the area that we are developing. So that would be one thing, that group, I believe, because the other people that I see in here are the Planning Commission, the city staff, and the key stakeholders. There's three mentioned as the main working, kind of like the task force on this thing. So that's number one. Can we please have a identification by name of the key stakeholders, how many they are, and how they're chosen? The second one I have is the area of focus. And I know this was raised early in the CAC, and I want to raise it again, that we said it early on, at the end of this process, we wanted to have something where we could truly put a spade in the ground, do something, because people are looking for us to act on something. And the studies have a lot of value, but also at times you have to take that first step. Sort of like I'm planting my garden. I have to make sure I get my peas in early or whatever, because you have to do the early stuff early, and then you got to do the next. So I'm just thinking, what if we just focus on planting a row of peas here and we get something done in this first step? And so I'm thinking, can we narrow the focus area? This is for everyone I question. Second question, can we narrow the focus area so that it only includes the two lots that are across the river, and that we actually get something accomplished on that? And the reason is, to spend the study on the large thing right now, the whole large picture, is if we start doing A and B, we may have other investments that affect C and D and the other outcomes. And
Absolutely.
I'd love to see us try to do something that is truly significant, strategic, right on these lots, off of Union and the next one over. So that would be my other question. Second question, can we talk about narrowing this area of focus so it isn't so large that we don't get something done? And those would be the two things I'm probably most concerned about doing, so that when we go into it, we can say, we are really going to be able to accomplish something here. So I don't have any problems with the large master plan or with the idea of the planning, and maybe it's a little bit to Brent's, that if we're going to do something, I think we should make sure that we truly are united and going forward with something we can accomplish, whether you call it a mandate or whatever. But you know, I just, and that those stakeholders are included. So it's kind of a question, but it's also a question for us. So I don't know if it's really just for you. I think it's really for us as we oversee it. You know, how are we going to truly answer to the voters and everyone that we're implementing this in a way that something can happen?
Sure. And, you know, maybe I think these are things we'll probably discuss on Monday night as well, as if we get this on the agenda. I think if we're gonna go, it'd be my thought, if we're gonna go through the design process, that we wouldn't, I understand what you're saying, we can get something done on those two lots, but I think we would be remiss to not look at downtown signage, for example, if we're gonna put some guidelines around this master plan, because we do have some leverage over that with our zero interest revolving loan fund, for example. And I think if we want to see a vision of what, you know, through this downtown master plan, what we want to see, then I think we should have some guidelines around what it is that we're going to ask people if they invest money in it. But I do hear your point on getting something done and not getting bogged down in the big picture too much. So,
Jim has a question.
Jim.
I do agree with Rod. We need to, we need to get something started to show people that we actually are doing something. And I agree with Brent also. I said, if we have plans for using city money or what have you, and private money, it should be the same. The plans should be the same. If we mandate one way of doing it, it should be for everybody.
I would, obviously, I would equally concur. I think, I mean, one of the feedbacks that came back from, you know, the master planning process was that, you know, even though there was, you know, public kind of, or there was a committee, many of those committee members felt that their voices, even on the committee, were not heard. You know, that when HKI came to a meeting, it was predetermined what some of the layout was going to be. And I think some of that is it's almost suggestive a little bit, that they're trying to kind of like say this is what we're looking at. But so I think I would agree with Rod that I think it would be nice to see more of the actual scope. I think, you know, that would help us also, you know, and I think that kind of comes a little bit back to like the aquatic center. I think, you know, the understanding of what certainly I had about what the aquatic center was going to look at, the committee was going to look at, and what they delivered wasn't the same. I thought the scope was to define or determine whether Fergus Falls could sustain and justify, you know, an aquatic center of its own, and obviously it went down into the weeds of actually finding the site, and I think I would like to know exactly what these people are doing, and I would agree. I think the area is too large. I think if we're making a definition about signs, it shouldn't be necessarily restricted to just two streets. If we have a plan that we're going to say this is the type of sign we want, then it should be throughout the city. I don't know why you would want and not, because the whole idea is branding and identification of the community. So that should start when you come off the interstate. You know, it should be all the way to downtown that this is Fergus Falls. So you don't have one set of signs, you know, from, say, you know, interstate to Broadway, and then at Broadway it changes to a different set of signs.
I don't know if we're talking about wayfinding or if we're talking about business signs, but I think we have to define a downtown zone that we're going to work on. And second of all, if we're going to start mandating what every private business owner sign has to look like, I think we're going to be in
trouble.
That's just I mean, I think we're going down a road we don't want to go down. But if we want to
Don't
look at
mandate, I mean, you know.
right, I mean, if we look at a downtown district, which is what the planning process for this master plan has been, I mean, I think we set the guidelines, what we'd like to see, and anytime we have some control over the outcome of that, then we influence that as best we can. That's, seems to me, but could we bring this to Monday night with some of these questions? Maybe we could define, I mean, you could go through the process of public meetings or stakeholder groups, or how those would convene, and maybe answer, would that make sense? That's easy enough, right?
Certainly, and Mayor, council members, stakeholders have been identified as property owners, business owners, tenants, whether they own or lease their space, prospective, well, the property owners, on areas that could be developed that might be influenced by this. So we can put together a number of how many those are. We are able to pull those mailing addresses for the taxpayers from our GIS system, and we do have a business list that we did do direct outreach to last fall that for each tenant within there. So we certainly anticipate those as being the key stakeholders, given our smaller area than the larger downtown riverfront master plan that was a much larger geography. So to do direct mailings to each property owner there would have been cost prohibitive. But here we are in a much smaller geography to look at. And as far as a consultant, we do bring in a consultant that has expertise that we don't have here within the staff, and that's what we are paying for. So we do look for them to guide and advise the content of this work. That is why we're engaging them. If we felt we had the capacity in-house, we would be doing this work in-house and not engaging a consultant. So just to make sure that is clear, and that the why we engage the consultant and what we're looking for them is their expertise and having done this work in other communities and what achieves the results that we're looking to achieve going forward within the project.
I think we'll definitely could agree that this won't go on the consent agenda on Monday night. But in the interest of moving this forward, can we get a motion to bring this for discussion Monday night?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Brent, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Yavaro, speaking of getting projects going, Brian Yavaro is going to talk to us about the downtown parking study, the plaza, and the amphitheater projects.
Yes, thank you, Honor, and good morning. In continuation of what we're referring to in the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan, with staff, we have sat down and kind of discussed some potential next steps going forward in regards to the downtown. If you refer to the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan, I believe that's page 8. I kind of modified it to kind of show some, what I'm trying to determine right now and discuss with the council is what we like to, is the scoping. Three main components, or relatively two, we're looking at making improvements on is number one is the amphitheater with riverfront access trail improvement, kind of shown there, encompassed in the revision cloud in yellow. This next one would be the riverfront balcony improvements, and we're looking to scope that project as from Union to Mill Street. And the third aspect of this is what we might be looking to do for parking lot east. And that would entail first steps, probably doing a parking study in consideration prior to advancing with actual improvements and final design in that particular area. So I'm calling these two projects Public Improvement 9767 and Public Improvement 9768. You have some additional exhibits, pages also included in your packet for this particular parking lot east. I'm also recommending, if the council does approve, doing some enhancements on, that would be Court Street, perhaps some bump outs, some enhancements on the street itself to, further enhance that crosswalk, riverfront balcony that from Mill Street or from the amphitheater to Union. So at this time, I'm requesting some conversation and seeking with the councils how they'd like to proceed with implementation of the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan. Number one, I'm requesting initiating Public Improvement 9767 and Public Improvement 9768. And I'm also looking for authorization for staff to procure a professional services agreement for design for the amphitheater and the riverfront balcony, and also authorization for staff to procure a professional services agreement for a parking study.
So, Brian, at this point, we initiate the projects.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to go out and get quotes, or, get quotes for proposals for agreement for the design, and then also for the parking study. You bring those back, and then we have an idea of what we're talking about to go to the next step. Meanwhile, we still have to figure out what our projects are, how we're going to pay for it.
This, by requesting, I guess for lack of better terms, the council's appetite moving forward, it helps me scope and communicate from a consultant what the city is looking for, to get, obviously, the better, more information we can communicate to a consultant, better price, better understanding would result in that.
Your Honor.
Questions for Rod?
As I look at this and kind of get a sense of long-term, can we think about like 4 or 5 phases instead of talking only about the, like an area and breaking it down time-wise? I think that's been some discussion about, like what could be done, ways you come to us, you're thinking also what could be done this spring, what could be done in 1 year, what could be done in 3 years, or what could be done in 5 years. So we had another kind of measurement to go by, and then when I'm looking at that, I see between Court and Mill, and there's been some activity and talk, different groups in town. I know, Rotary's one that's looking for projects, has planned riverfront ideas, but how about the parking lot between Union and Court Street? Which isn't showing there fully, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I know we've had 2 years, or has it been 2 years or 1 year where we've talked about refinishing that parking area with the stub, the stubs on it and the old flower pot planters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like to me, that's sort of like the face as people come through Fergus and they turn from Lincoln and go, they see that lot every time. That's the 15,000 car a day viewpoint. And so my first question is, have we considered the business result, that is the actual tax base business result, as we look at these first year, like spring, 1 year, 3 year, what could we do this year that might increase the downtown shopping and traffic? Kind of an idea. And I believe that lot we talked about low-hanging fruit. We've heard that word used a lot, and I know what that's like because I can imagine it. You can just about pluck it. And I'm thinking that lot is much easier to start on, as a low-hanging fruit, and to clean off those stubs and get things going there. So I'm trying to think of ways that we've talked about the farmer's market, helping the farmer's market come downtown if they wanted to, et cetera. Can we look at that lot as well, or is there a reason we're only looking at the Mill Court lot? Because I just feel that other lot is easier to start something on. And then in recent discussions, those who don't know, the Summerfest is on. There's been rumors it's not. It is happening. And the parade this year will dump. Many businesses have said we want the parade to be downtown. Can't imagine a parade in a city like ours. So we will bring the parade downtown this year, and it will come and end downtown. So the people there will disperse into the downtown area, and we're looking to have some activities. And one of the lots we've hoped would be ready for those would be the lot between Union and Court Street. So there could be an area where there might be some activities in the evening. All these things are part of this first year, like a spring approach. So I'd like to see us both, Your Honor, and Council and others, I'd like to see us look at this before we initiate projects or go out, that we truly focus, pinpoint an area that we're going to start something on. Because I know it's easy on paper to think it's there, but it isn't real until it actually happens. It isn't real. It's just on paper, and it's a lot of work, obviously, So that's what I'd like to see. Could we get that, focus on that other lot and talk about that before we put the other ones forward and start more advancing that, to have them both together looked at as a two-lot package. What are we going to do first, second, and exactly know exactly where we're going before we start a journey here. That's
And I understand what you're indicating there. Just in regards to what we have in front of here, it'd be a simple and to do it more piecemeal, but you're looking for a more holistic implementation plan, that's definitely something we can refer to. As far as initiating projects, I would even recommend a parking study. It'd be considered in one of these projects and everything, but the parking study encompasses, it's kind of the downtown area, so we'll take into account the west parking lot and east parking lots. So moving forward, it would be a requirement that we'd want to have done an analysis, however we proceed in regards to the parking lot themselves. So that's a potential too as well. But as far as overall implementation and phasing, there was an implementation schedule in the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan. But like I said, just before you, we can proceed any way you want. From my aspect, I'm going to look at the constructability on how future improvements would relate to each other, so we minimize rework or anything like that. Obviously, it's impossible at some times, but if there's some key things, components as far as our utilities, that's something I'd like to take a look at too.
Yeah, 1 second, Anthony. Thank you, Brian. And also, the council's authorized the implementation task force implementation committee of the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan. And I think that's definitely something that we do in conjunction, as you say. I mean, the Downtown Riverfront Master Plan mentions.
Task force, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. To actually put this together and create the design of where these things actually, Brent had a great idea of actually, anyway, we all have our ideas about getting down to the details of the project. Brent's idea was to move the farmer's market over closer up top of the amphitheater. So there's all kinds of great ideas, and I think that task force will put those together. But it also mentions pop-up, or what example, while we're designing the 3-year, the 2-year, the 3-year, that we can get things done. So I agree with your sentiment. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I think we can get a project initiated while focusing on what is actually realistic to get done this year and to get some things happening down there. So I think that's part of the whole project moving forward, in my eyes at least. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
I was just going to perhaps in the interest of time, and I think it's a bigger discussion than necessarily we want to kind of try to conduct this morning. But I wonder if it wouldn't be that we meet, we have a kind of an early kind of council session one day, focused on where do each council member see how they want to implement. I think we need to get a consensus, because I think if we have a task force that's, to do this and come back, it's either the task force has come back with a recommendation of this is what we see, or we can probably skip some of that if we, get a solicitation of kind of where the council is looking at what they're going to, vote for or vote against, so that, as you say, we're not going down a variety of different paths that then just get kind of obviously curtailed. So I think it would be good to just have everybody's opinion of what do you see, and we can task council members to say what do you see. I mean, I agree with Rod. I mean, if we can do some temporary things that will start to draw people downtown, if that was on the Union side of that, if you could get like the farmers market, then you've got those people coming down. At the same time, then you've got the potential to physically do the development on, this car park out here. And so then it's, the people are already moving downtown. But I kind of think we need a consensus of what we see as being the next step forward, rather than just kind of piecemealing the things.
With that being said, Your Honor and members, can we move forward potentially with a parking study? Because that is an all-encompassing piece that is going to be the first step in anything we do. And then we can schedule a work session to dive into the specifics of what these other projects may look like or how we want to proceed. But I would recommend the council allow us to move forward with initiating the parking study, because that truly is step number one for anything we're going to do downtown.
I would offer that, Your Honor.
Second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Could we discuss that, Your Honor?
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We can
Yeah, I want
discuss-
to discuss the parking study before we move it
Sure,
forward.
we'll move it, we'll have, discuss that on Monday night, if that's appropriate. We have that motion to move that to Monday night discussion. And I don't know what the work session schedule is, but I'd like to have this work session as soon as possible. Just because I think we need to get some consensus and move forward on some of this stuff, because we go through these studies, we agree to them, and then we come back and we get bogged down in the details, and I think we've got to get started on something. I mean, I agree that we got to get something going this spring, but we just got to get on the same page and move forward. I mean, I just think that we just taking one step forward and two steps back, so.
Yeah, I think, Your Honor, if I could just, that's been the concern, and I think that's exactly why I'm addressing it this way, is that if we bring out a master plan and we don't have the true buy-in of the businesses downtown, we're taking steps backward. We may think we know what they want, but they may say, you don't know what we want. So I'm just saying we have to slow down, truly focus, and get the stakeholders in. And I agree with you. We don't want to be going forward and back. But we mustn't assume we know what they want until we truly hear them saying, this is what we hear you saying, and this is what we know you're going, so we're going together. And that's my only concern, representing, and my ward is a lot of downtown, so I hear that. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, as you say.
I think at some point, the task force is identified to come back with some of these recommendations, does include representation from downtown. So at some point, we have to put a task force together, get the people in the room, and then vote on going forward or not going forward. Recommendation. But we can have that discussion get the direction of each council member, and then hopefully we can get the right people in the room, come up with a plan that we can get together as a council and support. We'll look at the schedule, I guess. We have the.
Monday night, the EIC.
EIC is.
Yeah.
4 o'clock. All right, sounds good. Next item on the agenda is the water access charge request from Wash and Go.
Yeah, and, excuse me, I'll try to move through this as quick as we can. This December here, I received a formal letter from the new owner of the Wash and Go facility located at Union and Fur Avenue. The owner's letter is solely in regards to the WAC fee, the water assessment charge that was assessed to his property. This fee that was calculated towards his facility was per the table that we have in our city ordinance, section 3.40 in the appendix, that dates back to 1976. Per this, the 3 automatic car washes and the system he's proposing, his total number was 91 WAC units at $450 a fee. In consideration of the previous land use at this site, he was given a credit of 31 units. That revised his total WAC charge of $27,000 against this facility. Per the ordinance, looking at it and what a WAC unit consists of, one WAC unit equates to 100,000 gallons of water annually. And also in the ordinance, the city engineer shall define the parameter for each water connection connecting to this system. I have done a lot of research into this particular incident, even though it doesn't present itself a lot of times. But I'm recommending a adjustment of his WAC charge to this facility for an automatic from 30 to 7 units. And I apologize, there are a few errors in here. I am aware of this on his units, and I can work through the building department to get that really established. But essentially, I'm looking to, I believe it's very justifiable to assess him at 7 units per automatic car wash. That equates to, from his letter, a total of 39 WAC unit credit. That equals $17,550. That amount is also one of the errors I have in there. Had some discussion. But I'm basing this recommendation on a lot of considerations. Present day applicability of the WAC unit table in the appendix. The new facility does not require any improvements to the in-place connection. The city's water production distribution system and collection and treatments infrastructure has the capacity. Comparison review of other historical water usage trends for similar facilities within the city, and the review of the manufacturer's equipment specifications and utility needs. I think car washes, just like a lot of equipment nowadays. Efficiencies have greatly evolved over the years, and this is particularly one of these systems that has. Last thing, I'm basing my analysis off a review of the Metropolitan Council's SAC and WAC program fees, and that's also attached for an example. Yes, this is a Metropolitan Council, but you can clearly see that their SAC charge, sewer availability charge, is, and it's inverse proportional to what the WAC fee is that municipalities down there request from the Met Council, but they're, for a similar facility, they're about 11 SAC, which equates to 11 water availability charges for that facility. So clearly, there are some discrepancies, but all in all, they don't have a set. They look at, as indicated in their table, is to contact the Met Council and everything, and through those conversations, they'll basically look at the actual water trends and usages for the facility. They don't have a set charge unit rate and the basis thereof. So at this time, I'm requesting the council to approve my recommendation to credit 39 WAC units to this wash and go facility. That equates to 7 WAC units per automatic car wash.
Any
And-
questions for Brian?
The figures, could we just get it in, it's going from 30-some thousand assessment to what?
He's currently at $27,000. Was charged $27,000.
Okay.
And with that credit, 27,000 minus the 17,550, so that's about $9,400 is what he will actually be charged.
Okay, thank you.
Which he has paid, but it'll be, we're speaking of credit right now, because he has paid that $27,000.
Thank you. I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Any other questions? Thank you, Rod. Second. Tom? Consent agenda?
Yep.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
One quick question. I'm glad that Brian is an engineer and not the accountant. Job is safe, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Item
Brian.
number 6 is Lake Alice DNR determination for supplemental water system. Again, Brian Yavaro.
Yes, this memo before you is in regards to the Lake Alice project. If you recall, we've been submitting for DNR appropriations permit for some time. Back in, let me see here, back in August 29th, we received an update from the DNR that I had briefly described a few excerpts from that presented to this council. Since then, following receipt of that, representatives from the city did sit down with the DNR and discuss this project, this Lake Allison project, the supplemental water system, and the infrastructure improvements, the project as a whole, in much greater detail. And part of that meeting too, we also requested, moving forward, that the DNR provide us an official denial letter citing the specific regulatory statutes for this appropriations permit. On January 19th, 2018, I did receive the official DNR order of the commissioner letter as requested, and that is also included in the packet. Pursuant to this letter, if the city so chooses, we have 30 days from the date of this letter to request a hearing on the order and along to provide a surety bond with the city by the city council to make a motion if we want to submit a determination with this. So discussing in regards to the order of the commissioner's letter here, it equates to, it's not overly, throughout these conversations, it basically essentially covers a few things. Invasive species, talking with the GNR hydrologist, going through this first permit and everything. We guess Otter Tail River has been designated with invasive species and zebra mussels in particular. Because of that, we would have to install some type of filtration system and a pumping system from the river. That's somewhere in there, 30 micron filter systems and everything. Essentially, that's extra cost. The main component, though, with the flushing of Lake Alice consists of the effluent degradation that could occur if left untreated and discharging into the river. That, once again, is another infrastructure improvement we could install in line with the pumping system. However, unknowing what that would entail, but I would anticipate that would add additional significant cost to the system itself. So my recommendation at this time is perhaps, given on the basis for these letters and what the permit application was submitted upon, is that we waive our ability to file a motion against this determination based on the information we're talking about right now. And I believe we should actually perhaps go back to the drawing board and look at, with all these comments, what they have cited is more so upstream best management practices. That has been a component of Lake Alice Improvement Project in its entirety. We just haven't, the pumping system was a kind of a sequence moving forward and seeing how, if that system was installed, how the lake would react. But like I said, best management practice upstream has always been a component. And I think we should be more geared towards looking at that in the watershed itself. That could be as far as our MS4 program, enhancing that, public education, rain gardens, and perhaps some upstream structures to help for sediment collection and phosphorus and everything prior to it entering into Lake Alice. But we're looking at a lot of dredging has always been a component, but dredging once again was contingent that the upstream devices were installed prior to us being able to secure funding or even apply for funding to do dredging. So it really boils down to is looking at the upstream, more so low-hanging fruit aspects and what we could accomplish that essentially would be lower cost, I believe, to the taxpayers moving forward. And we can refine this, but before you right now, I'm just requesting that we just waive our right for an appeal of this determination.
Any questions for Brian?
I would offer that.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Darren. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Brian. One last thing, maybe not one last thing. Two last things. Union Avenue Bridge Phase 1 study.
Yes, go over this quick. Union Avenue Bridge located Union Avenue over the railroad tracks north of Lincoln. Last year. It was rated and it determined it required a weight restriction on the bridge. We had a second opinion with this, meeting with WSB and Otter Tail County and everything, but essentially, and the MnDOT Bridge Office, but essentially the weight restriction is as posted. Because of this, we're looking to start the project, meeting with District 4 Bridge Office and the managers. It'd be best if the city starts the process of doing a preliminary engineering report study on this bridge, and they can identify some potential funding sources and everything that may be available to rehabilitate this bridge. If you recall, the Union Avenue Bridge is a major component thoroughfare in the city, so I think it's one of those items that we should be looking at. It could take some time, but MnDOT recommends we proceed down this path because special programs for funding and everything, when they are present, shovel-ready projects generally rank higher and prioritize for funding if available. So at this time, I'm just requesting to initiate public improvement 9013, the Union Avenue Bridge rehabilitation study. And number 2, accept Interstate Engineering's Phase 1 professional services proposal in the amount of $25,000.
Questions?
Can we do that in one motion?
Bring it
So
to the
moved.
council. Thank you, Jim. Setting a record for motions offered this morning. I like it.
Second.
Tom, thank you. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. And Brian, the access easement for the second addition to Pebble Lake Estates.
Yes, thank you. Before you, this is a request for an access easement agreement for the second addition to Pebble Lake Estates. Up on the board is the preliminary plat for this subdivision. The Planning Commission has already, and I reviewed it and everything, we'll be making recommendation to accept this final plat. But as a condition of the plat, I believe it's noted there in the red, the owner is requesting an access agreement onto our Pebble Lake Gulf Road Drive. If you recall, back in 2014, the same action was presented and accepted by the council, which is reflected in that yellow portion shown on the screen and everything. So at this time, I'm just requesting and spoke with the city attorney, and this can be handled through a resolution, but it is a request, a contingent request of accepting the final plat for second addition to Pebble Lake Estates.
Any questions?
I'll offer that, yeah. Jim can't offer every person. You can second it.
Rod, thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Darren. All in favor of bringing this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a update on the Noise Park playground equipment. Steve Plaza.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'd like to bring forward just an update on the Noise Park. Back in 2013, the City Council approved the donation of land for Mrs. Noise, and it was agreed upon that all improvements would be done through donations. As to date, we put a 10-foot wide asphalt path, biking, walking path, natural plantings, picnic shelter, benches, concrete tables, and our butterfly sculpture. The final phase is, it was her wishes to add a playground up there, and through the sale of her Cadillac and her condo, which was bequeathed to the city, and additional funds, we are now able to do that. There's currently $67,718 in the Noise Park donation, and installing the play structure, concrete curbing, 2 benches, that will leave about $967 into that account. We'd like to get that installed this summer in May, June, depending on the weather. And there's the structure up there. It's for, I asked a few companies to give me a play structure. I gave them a bid of $65,000 turnkey. Includes the poured and play surface. It's that rubberized synthetic mat that they can install. And I forwarded those options to Mrs. Noise's niece, and this is the play structure they picked. So I just wanted to update on the council. No action is required. I just want to let you know that we're moving forward on that. If there's any common suggestions, please let me know, but it's all through donated funds.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions of Steve?
Awesome. Okay,
That's
thank
great
you.
news. Thank you, Steve. We're going to take item 10 off and move that to Monday night, as Kyle is under the weather today. Number 11 on the agenda, boards and commission revitalization. Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. For the sake of time, I'll shorten what I was planning on speaking about, but this is just an informational update, not looking for any action. As you all know, we've spent several months working on revitalizing our boards and commissions, and Lynn has really led that process, and she may be helpful to answer any questions you may have nearing the end of this. But some of the goals that we had in mind while we were working on this was ways in which we can revitalize the boards and commissions, redefine the purpose and mission of the boards and commissions, improve the effectiveness of these committees and their work, and then also ways in which we can provide training, education, and then also recognizing our volunteers. That's been comments that we've heard. They take positions on these committees with no real direction or orientation opportunities, so we're looking at helping with that concern. I'll just highlight a few of the recommendations. We want to formalize the application process. We want to have a application that people fill out which states their qualifications and gives everybody an opportunity to express interest in their various boards. We are looking to require city residency for all members. We're just of the mindset that with nearing 14,000 people in population, we certainly can find a handful of volunteers to fill our boards and committees. Looking at the same goal, residents can only serve on one city board or commission at a time. We're looking to change the term length from 2 years to 3 years. We're recommending that members can be reappointed if they have good attendance and participation after they've filled the 6 years and they take a year off. So if we get a really strong committee member and they have interest in continuing on, they can step off to satisfy that term limit and then get back on after a year. Looking to change the timeline from the February 1 to January 31 that we have now to actually a calendar year. So then the appointments would be made at the annual meeting, which is our first meeting in January, which would just simplify things for the mayor and us that are working through that process. We would develop a position description and expectations for each board, so essentially a job description that can go along with these committee appointments and something they can refer to. We would ask these boards and committees to submit an annual work plan to the council so the council can have that accountability and understand what these boards are doing. We would look at setting up reporting requirements from the boards to communicate with the council. We talked about having some of those updates at the committee of the whole meetings as we move forward. Staff would be looking to provide orientation sessions for board and commission members. We would be recommending that we designate a budget for the boards and commissions and then put a process in place to allow these commissions to request funds, so have a specific ask. Right now, they don't have any money to work with, so they truly, can't do a whole lot. We're also recommending that we stop feeding the boards that meet over the noon hour. There is a couple boards right now that still get lunches and hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's probably not a good practice, and we're looking to end that. And then also just a mechanism to recognize our volunteers. We currently don't do a good job of doing that, and they do spend a lot of time and efforts on these boards and committees. So those are some of the recommendations. Looking at the boards and committees that we currently have, we're suggesting that we keep as is the Airport Advisory Board, the Charter Commission, the Library Board, Public Safety Advisory Committee, the Public Arts Commission. Some of the proposed changes, and again, these are staff recommendations, and we offer these recommendations knowing that the council may have differing opinions, but we're looking at combining the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Right now, those boards meet separately, and we could combine both of them, absorb some of the members of the Board of Zoning onto the Planning Commission, and it would still remain a 7-member commission. We floated this past the Planning Commission, and they were receptive of the idea and certainly were welcoming of bringing on the additional duties. One of the ones that we looked at was combining Parks and Rec Board, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Mayor's Natural Resources Advisory Committee, and beautiful Fergus Falls, and renaming that the Parks, Rec, and Trails Committee. And that would be a 7-member body. Right now, the Park and Rec Advisory Committee is, I think, 5 members. The BPAC is 5 members. So we would grow the board, but you would absorb the other boards. And really, the impetus for that conversation was when we were working on the Glacial Edge Trail Master Plan and then subsequently a funding application, we were really puzzled. Do we bring that application before the park board because it's truly a park and rec amenity, or do we bring that application before the BPAC, who's focusing on the bicycle and pedestrian issues? And it just made us start thinking there's a lot of overlap in what some of these groups are working on, and maybe this is an opportunity to consolidate and give both groups more breadth to what they're doing, because I know the park board agendas at times can be light. The BPAC agendas, they haven't been light, but it's certainly they're low on membership right now and looking for members, and maybe it's an opportunity to consolidate those. And the other reason is we staff all of these things, and if we could do that all at once, that would certainly be an efficiency that we could identify. Combining the Heritage Preservation Commission and the Sister City Commission was a thought. The Sister City Commission has really evolved into more activities with the school district, and in discussing this with the Heritage Preservation Commission, they had mixed reviews. There were some that were receptive and said bring it on. There were others who weren't in favor of that. And that would be adding a couple members to that board, which could come from the Sister City Commission. So there is some continuity. And then finally, one of the proposals that we were looking at was moving the Human Rights Commission out from under the umbrella of the city and potentially under the United Way umbrella or another umbrella. And the reason that that's been identified as a potential change is that it would give this group more flexibility to work on some of the initiatives that they want to work on. I know over the past year I've had to, mention that some of the things, you are part of the city, and we have to be very careful in some of the activities we undertake as a group, and having that autonomy would allow them to really engage in more public-facing activities that they've expressed an interest in, and would really allow them to operate no strings attached in a sense. And the same mechanism for reporting any human rights violations within the city of Fergus Falls would remain, which is reporting those to the city attorney, who then forwards those on to the state human rights office. So just a thought in a way in which they can operate more efficiently and do some of the more focused things that they wanted to do. So to wrap it up, I just wanted to highlight the timeline. You know, today we wanted to just bring this forward as what we're thinking about. We kind of want to park it and allow for the community to review and provide feedback between now and March 30th, where we'll bring this up as a follow-up discussion at the committee of the whole meeting. In the meantime, the mayor at the next council meeting will have to make appointments for the 2018 boards and commissions. As I mentioned, they currently end on January 31st, which is today. So he'll be making those appointments. We're hoping the council begins to take action on this proposal in April. And then from April to August, it would allow us to produce the orientation process, packets, position descriptions, policies, update the code to whatever the council decides on, and then begin rolling out that process application, or the application process, excuse me, on September 1st for next year, the 2019 appointments, which would then be made at our annual meeting in 2019 if these changes or these recommendations were accepted. So we'll put this on our city website. I think it may already be there. It was in the packet today, so I encourage everybody to look at it, provide input, feedback, and then the next time that we'll talk about it is in March, if the council's okay with that.
Any questions for Andrew?
Just a couple. Obviously, we had like the Business Development Council, local commission, the HRA that operates that farm. Development Fergus Falls. And then,
Yep.
obviously, we also got Forward Fergus Falls. And then I wonder as well if we could, you know, in some of the expectations, or kind of one of the bullet points is limiting kind of like how many city staff attend the meeting. So I mean, yeah, there could be probably like primary city member staff, but obviously if there's something, I mean, for example, if Amy's on something and there's an engineering project, then obviously Brian would attend to discuss something like that. Because I think, as you say, we're trying to make it more efficient for staff.
Right.
So that there, you know, there's not 2 or 3 city member staffs going to a meeting.
Yep.
And then I would also kind of ask, define who's going to take the minutes, whether that's going to be the city or whether that's going to be a member of the board.
Sure, we'll, Your Honor, members, we'll contemplate that between now and March, and right now, it's kind of a mixture. We do have staff people that take it on some, and then committee members on others, but we'll define if that's something that could fall strictly on the committee members or on staff for all boards, yep.
Your Honor.
Along those lines, Anthony, I think that one thing for the council to consider is some of these, I know there's been some resistance to the consolidation of some of the groups. And if there's groups that want to get together and work on issues, I think that's a good thing. But we should consider staff time. I mean, I don't think there's a reason the committee shouldn't get together if there's a group of people who want to work, but it have to be considered a staff time. So.
I think that's where I'm doing from, is that, you know, we're trying to get away from staff spending 8 hours a day at meetings, so that they can be productive towards the city goals.
Your Honor, when are we envisioning under the request that the council respond to this? Are we going to talk about this at another scheduled time before March, or is it individually?
The whole meeting in March 30th.
March.
We'll present it likely in more defined detail at that meeting, and then we would be looking for the council to make changes to the city code if they were acceptable to the recommendations that would no longer be compatible with our current code. So we'll define what those changes would look like and get more specific.
Any other questions? All right, so we're looking for feedback through March 30th, and we'll take action at that time. 2 quick updates. One on the
Well, I'm
email
wondering
and
on
calendar
the
system.
email and calendar system, do you want to talk about it today, or would you rather go to the next committee of the whole meeting?
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we'll
Because
move
it's going to take us a little bit to go through that.
Let's move that to the next committee of the whole meeting, if that's all right with everybody. And then Buse Township, I don't know how long that is, if we could talk about that Monday night, or if it's a quick update.
Well, I'll just mention quickly, there was a memo in your packet from Gordon Hajdukovic, and he's in a place with warmer weather, so we won't mention where. there's not much to update. They've, Councilmember Fish and Gordon attended the last two Buse Board meetings. And at the first meeting, we highlighted the map and what it would entail. And they said, well, you guys go out, talk to the residents that would be impacted, and then report back to us as to what the tide or what the feelings of those affected residents would be. Gordon went back on January 10th and reported back to the township board that it's kind of a mixed bag. There's some people that we've made several attempts to reach who haven't responded. There's some people who are certainly opposed, and there's some people who have been waiting for several years. So it's really just not, it's just a mixture of all of the above. And the township board is looking to potentially take action on a joint resolution. We do have an orderly annexation agreement for this area, so essentially the city council can do as they wish with it, but they're looking at potentially acting on a joint resolution at their February meeting or their March annual meeting. They were leaning towards their March annual meeting. From a city standpoint, it really doesn't matter if it's in February or March, but it does matter that if the council wants it to, that it continues to proceed. And it is moving in that direction right now. So there's not a lot to update other than there have been check-ins more than once with the township board, and we're moving towards action on a joint resolution.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions on that update? If not, just a couple announcements. The February 5th, next Monday, is the City Council EIC joint meeting at 4 o'clock, right here in the City Council chambers. And then followed by City Council meeting at 5:30. Committee of the Whole, next Committee of the Whole is February 14th. And then, as Rod mentioned earlier, one note I had, the Summerfest is any other updates?
Just a question on what we have before us to do and the time that the staff needs to do it. If you need a response, a staff to some of these things, like Brian's, the engineering, do we need another meeting in between there of Committee of the Whole or something to get, we've got a lot to talk about, it seems like. Just wondering if, in the interests of our necessity and where we're at in our process, if we should have a Committee of the Whole a week from today to talk about that. The planning, the issues of planning and sequence and area, so the staff can keep going on, or whatever, you know.
Next Wednesday?
Yeah, a week from.
I got a prior engagement.
Oh, okay.
MSU.
I think that it's maybe more importantly, it's the discussion that Anthony was talking about, so that we can all talk about what we're gonna support going forward, which are the phases. We talked about, the short term, this year, the 2 to 3 years, and the long term. But I think before we put that implementation group together to come back and make a recommendation to us, we should hear from each of the council members, as Anthony said, of what we can support, where we're at, so that we don't come back and get bogged down in details that we could be worked out in the beginning. So I don't know necessarily that it's so much staff. I think it's more council. So if we have that, I'm in favor of having a meeting, whichever staff can be here, but mostly have a council discussion so that we can state where we're at, what we're willing to support, so we can move some of these projects forward.
So you're talking about on February 5th? That discussion?
No, I think it should be a separate discussion. So a week from today is what, February 7th?
Yeah, I mean, not that it matters, but we have, it's the West Otterdale Crop Show that day, so I won't be here, and probably Darren might not be here.
Correct. In the
So,
morning?
all day. Well, it starts at
8:30. And we're usually there by 8.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at schedules and maybe. Yes, Lynn.
We don't have a work session on February 20th yet. That's something that can wait until then, and that's a date that's open right now.
I
Pencil in for that now, and so
The
at least we've
20th?
got something on the calendar, and then.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to wait 3 weeks. I really, honestly, I think there's a lot of things that should happen, and I just wish we could sit in the room for an hour, get everyone and walk out with a plan going forward.
Can we do kind of like, is the room available on like the sort of 4 o'clock on the 12th, Monday the 12th? You know, Oh.
Starts at 5:30 that night.
but that would give us a reason to be efficient and get out of here.
If we got you and Darren out here by yourself next Wednesday, the 7th. Would you guys be able to make it? I think so. 5 to 8. I think we should talk to, maybe we should have all 8 people here. So we won't set anything in stone yet. We'll send out
Send out some
possible dates and see if we can get all 8 council members and whatever staff is available to be here. So we can.
And for the record, I was referring to his meeting. I just want to make sure we do the things we need to do so staff doesn't get hung up and waiting for us to decide.
Anything else to come before the council? We're adjourned.